to yet another edition of Bits to Billions. We're bringing you this episode from Mumbai. We're here to meet an online education startup that became a unicorn. It seeks to make Ivy League courses more affordable and accessible for students and professionals. Founded by Ashwin Damera and Chaitanya Kalipatnapu in 2010, executive education startup Eruditus began with offline classes where faculty from Europe's INSEAD and the Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad would teach a 10-day classroom program in a 5-star hotel for 10 to 15 people, mostly working professionals. But that changed in 2015. It pivoted to an online teaching model and raised venture capital from investors such as Bertelsmann and Sequoia. Today, Eruditus and Emeritus, its online wing, make Ivy League education accessible and affordable to those who seek it. They have tie-ups with MIT, Harvard, Columbia, Berkeley, etc. INSEAD was the first school they tied up with. Eruditus became a unicorn last year after it raised a whopping 650 million led by SoftBank and Axel at a valuation of 3.2 billion.
Hey,
Ashwin,
good to meet you.
Great to meet you. Great to be in your city, Mumbai. Welcome to Bits to Billions. So as I said, Eruditus seeks to make Ivy League courses more accessible, affordable, targeted at executives, working professionals. But if I look at EdTech today, there's a lot of noise, a lot of concern that the dream run for education technology companies in India is perhaps coming to an end, that people are going back to offline. There's not much of online happening anymore. Would you agree with that assessment? How does Eruditus see the EdTech landscape?
I think you should break the EdTech landscape into 3 buckets: K-12, test prep and higher ed. And so we clearly operate in the higher ed space. To some extent there can be skepticism in K-12 as well as in the test prep space because of COVID has kind of receded, people are going back to offline. But if you look at higher ed, especially working professionals where we operate, I think our future is very bright. Why? Because universities have gone online. Regulation in India especially has facilitated more online degrees, more online courses. And today, working professionals are all embracing virtual first. So imagine you can, sit in your home, wherever in India it is. It could be Jabalpur, and you can do a course from an MIT or an IIT. I don't think that trend is reversing.
Right. But Ashwin, we've seen a lot of edtechs take measures to rationalize and resize their workforce layoffs. I think you've also had to do that. How hard have you been hit by the current slowdown?
So I don't think it's EdTech only. If you look at the broad startup ecosystem, you've seen that everybody is looking at burn. Because in general, the world that we're in, right, the funding that was there last year or year before is no longer there. So everybody's talking about path to profitability and, reducing your burn so that you can actually increase your runway. In fact, some large companies also have reduced hiring, are laying off people, whether it's the Microsofts or Googles or Amazons of the world. So why single out only EdTech? But specifically to EdTech, there is a point there because there were some parts of EdTech, especially K-12 and test prep, that saw massive growth in the last 2 to 3 years. And many founders have projected that growth forward and hired and scaled as per that. And that clearly has to scale back, right? So there is some correction to be done, but longer term, if you think about this sector, what are we saying? Like today, less than 5% of people in India are learning online, right? Why will that number not be 25, 30%? If you look at India just today, right, only about 27% of Indians are finishing high school and going to college. In the US, that is 80%. In UK, that's about 50, 60%. In China, it's 45%. So, and that number, by the way, in India, that 27% is 40 million. In the next 10 years, why would that not double? Then there will be 40 million new students in higher education. We can't build enough campuses, Chandra, to create 40 million seats. So I think the future is very bright. And online is the way forward for this country to realize the demographic dividend. Right? Because we're not going to have the brick and mortar university seat. So we have to create skilling opportunities, degree and non-degree, in using online as a medium to take education to the masses. So I am super confident that the secular trend of online is going to continue.
Come on, Ashwin, maybe we can grab some coffee and get to your backstory in this next segment. So, what's different about you is this is your second venture, Eruditus. You started up actually, your first venture was Travel Guru, you know, sometime in 2008, 2005. But it had to fold in the aftermath of the Mumbai attacks and the financial, the subprime crisis and so on. So, how did that change you as an entrepreneur when you were building out your second venture? And how did you go from travel to education?
Yeah, so Travel Guru we started in 2005. We sold to Travelocity in 2009. And in that journey, I had many ups, many downs, and I learned a lot. We were just able to return money to our investors. So it was an okay outcome financially. But from a learning experience, Chandra, it was a really good experience for me. In fact, I think a lot of entrepreneurs benefit if they can go into those kind of experiences early on in their career. It definitely shaped the way I thought about my second startup, Eruditus, right? So one is I was not in a mad rush to raise capital. Second,
for the first 6 years, you were bootstrapped. You did not raise any money at all.
And we were profitable, which is why we didn't raise money. But we had a passionate focus on product market fit. That every year we would work with one university. Next year, one more. And we would really understand, hey, what drives the student success in a certain program, right? And when we decided to go online, which was also about 6 to 7 years later, and that's why we had to raise capital, we had a very good idea of how to create these online courses. We follow a SPOC pedagogy, small, private, online courses, versus say a MOOC pedagogy, which is like, hey, it's all self-paced, it's you, your laptop, maybe some popcorn. We believe that no, the magic that happens in a classroom that we had seen up close, we would sit in every single class, Chaitanya, my co-founder, and I, our families were involved. And we said, look, how do we recreate this magic online, right? And so growing slowly, but focusing a lot on the product. And then of course, you know, from 2017, we raised our round and we've scaled, you know, quite nicely. But that was part of our DNA. That came out of my learning in my first startup, where I think we raised a lot of money and started scaling, but you know, the product market fit wasn't fully proven, right? So, I think a second time entrepreneur is probably, and again I say probably, it's not 100% assured, is probably a better entrepreneur.
Because you've made your mistakes the first time around.
Funnily, we make mistakes second time round as well. And that's true for me as well, right? If I reflect back.
But is it faster to course correct because you know what you're doing wrong, you're more self-aware? Is that perhaps the change the second time around?
Absolutely, absolutely. You made certain mistakes. Also, I think you're more grounded. You're not flustered by the ups and downs.
You don't get your ego come in the way of, you know, this is my idea and this is the way it has to work.
More than ego, I think, so the first time when, you know, I would pitch to in say Travel Guru, I would pitch to a venture capital, they'll say no. I used to feel like, oh my God, something's wrong. Is it me? Is it the business? Something's wrong. Now somebody says no, it's for me, it doesn't matter.
So it's easier to deal with rejection also.
Ups and downs of this journey are something that, and similarly the ups. So today somebody might say, okay, you're a unicorn, you're valued at X. But you're like, okay, fine, that's nice, but you're not going to get carried away with it. Versus again, in my first startup, your first round you close, the second round you close, or you're doing an M&A, you're like, wow, so exciting. But then you realize it's a long journey, right? And so you're not taken away too much by the ups, nor are you kind of hammered by the downs. The one other thing I would say is, I think, you asked me also from travel, why to education, right? One thing I can say for sure is, everybody can start up, but nobody can guarantee the success at the end of that startup. Like everybody who starts, by the way, believes they have a fantastic idea. Otherwise, why would you start? Yet, only 2 out of 10 companies even survive the first year, right? So that's basic statistic. So what I decided to do the second time around was to say, look, I don't know the financial outcome, how that's going to be, but let me spend the next 10 years of my life in an area that I care deeply about. And for me, education and healthcare were 2 such areas. And as I started doing my work, I felt education was a better fit for me. And making high quality education, like my co-founder and I, we had access to very good education.
You went to Harvard, he went to INSEAD.
Exactly, right? I mean, doesn't get better than those educations that you can get. But how many people can even access that? How many people can afford that? And yet when you grow up in India, you grew up in Mumbai, I mean, look around us, there's, you know, islands of prosperity and oceans of poverty. right? And there's such an aspiration for education to do better in life. And so how could we make high quality education more accessible and affordable? And I said, look, if I spend 10 years doing this, and at the end of that I don't make a single rupee, but my life was well spent, right? So at least I know that I was going to spend 10 years doing some good. Now the icing is, supposing that startup also does very well, which when we started, nobody could predict.
Then that's a bonus, yeah.
So I think that's why the flip from say a travel to say education, and honestly, I think that was a wise decision, because every day.
So how many people have gone through your courses till now? How many working professionals have say gotten a degree from MIT or Harvard or INSEAD via Eruditus?
So we have about 70 university partners. Most of our courses are non-degree courses. We do have some degree courses. This year about 250,000 students would go through courses. And I think I can be somewhat proud and say that if Eruditus didn't exist, maybe 95% of them would not have gone through such a high quality education, right? My big, hairy, audacious goal is to touch the lives of 1 million students every year, right? I don't know if it's going to take us 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, but actually that's a success metric versus a dollar valuation, dollar revenue, blah, 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 blah.
But Ashwin, you know, you spoke about your first time venture, how it was, second time, how it was. When you were raising capital the second time around, I know you waited for 6 years to do it. Was it easier to approach investors because you had, you know, the experience of building a startup? Second time entrepreneurs, investors are a little more confident about.
Yeah, exactly. Even I thought that it'll be, you know, easier, but the second time round, 2016, 2017, we were rejected by 20 investors. In fact, I had a famous fund based in Bangalore say, are you a promoter or are you an entrepreneur? And even till this day, it kind of, you know, rankles. Why? Because they said, look, 7 years, you've scaled from only 0 to 10 million. You're profitable. You've not raised any venture capital money. You don't have ambition. And on the other hand, Chaitanya and I were thinking, hey, we're building product market fit. We are profitable. That's supposed to be a good thing. And then, of course, in 2017, we raised capital and we grew. But we got rejected by a lot of people, including our first investor, Bertelsmann, initially said no. They had a good reason. We were predominantly an offline business. So they wanted us to see, more traction in online before they were to invest, which I think was a legitimate reason. And so, look, like I said, rejection is part of our journey, even the second time round.
And what kind of anchored you and Chaitanya during those tough times?
We knew our students were very happy, right? And we had them making career transitions, and you know, some of them were moving globally for jobs. We knew our university partners were happy. So on two sides of the platform, we know that there was goodness. But online for us is still a very large opportunity globally.
Right. Ashwin, you know, you don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. So who did you look up to when you were trying to start up and, you know, when you were learning the ropes? Is there someone who you were inspired by?
In fact, you know, my brother, when he finished college, he went to the US, he did a PhD, and then he went to Stanford and he worked at HP Labs. And that was the path, you know, growing up in a South Indian family that I was supposed to take. So after my MBA at Harvard Business School, I had an offer with McKinsey to work in their New York office. And I left.
Which is like a dream job.
Which was honestly my dream job as well, right? But I had also this business plan for Travel Guru had done well in Harvard's business plan contest. Two of my friends gave me $100,000 and said, go start. So I took that money, came back to India and started. And honestly, my parents were concerned because this was not the path that I was supposed to go on. And you're right, I'm a first generation entrepreneur. I didn't have role models within my family. But you know, you figure it out. And that's why I said, as a first time entrepreneur, you make many mistakes. I had a co-founder, Ganesh, who was also a first time entrepreneur. We had some mentors. So for example, there was a gentleman called Ramaraj who had earlier worked at SIFI. I think it was a great sounding board. And so we had some mentors like that who helped us around. But honestly, it's not like I had somebody I looked up and aspired to be. If I look at the broader world, yes, somebody like a Narayana Murthy and the Infosys team inspires me because they were first generation and what they built is, you know, is amazing. But I didn't have somebody on a day-to-day basis, right? Second time round, I think Chait and I are a nice complement to each other. So I tend to be more about scale, how do we do things bigger. He tends to be more about
the
academic part. That's his background. And he's very calm, he's unflappable. I can, not that I get agitated, but I can get excited. And sometimes I say, okay, look, let's do this a little more slowly. So having that sounding board has been helpful. And honestly, second time around, you kind of got that experience. And so you don't really need a mentor or something like that.
Ashwin, if I look at the last 10 years, you focused on working professionals, but you also made an acquisition in the K-12 space, right? I think ID Tech, which works in the coding area. So going forward, what other adjacencies do you see for Eruditus? Which areas will you get into? Which segments will you stay away from?
Yeah, I think the stay away from is quite clear. I think we're going to be focused on higher education, and that means we stay away from everything else. Like test prep is not something that I'm excited by. Even K-12, this is not curriculum K-12, this was more about teaching the skills of the future to young adults. So we already had courses with an MIT or some of other schools teaching coding. So how do we take that for young adults? That was the hypothesis. The area that I'm most excited by in terms of growth is how do we take our courses to students through enterprise? Like, so how do we grow our B2B business? That's one area of focus. Second is how do we grow more regionally, right? So for example, in Spanish, in Portuguese, maybe in other languages, Arabic, Turkish, French, German, maybe one day in Hindi as well.
Ironically, you were profitable for the first 6 years when you were bootstrapped without any external capital. And then you started raising venture money, spending more and scaling more, and then you kind of became loss making. So when are you going to become profitable again?
So this year we won't be profitable. We will get very close to being profitable in the second half. My sense is that next fiscal, which is fiscal 24, is when we will be profitable. Look, we are continuing to grow quite well, so we'll nearly double this year versus last year. But some of the, let's say, expansions, we were going to go into certain markets, like say Brazil, for example. Those are things that we will slow down a little bit as we think very consciously about path to profitability.
Okay. Apart from running Eruditus, Ashwin also wants to invest into the ecosystem and back startups. Through his family office Damera Ventures, co-managed by him and his wife Bhagyashree, he recently invested 240 crore rupees in venture debt firm Innoven Capital India. So Bhagyashree, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Both of you, your story is almost like two states, right? He's from South India, from Chennai, and you're from Maharashtra. How did you guys meet?
Well, we have a very traditional arranged marriage.
That's hard to believe.
Nobody believes it.
I tell many people and they think, oh, you're bluffing, it's a love marriage. Amchi Mumbai girl meets Vada Pav Pani Puri girl meets Idli Dosa Rasam Sadam boy. We were introduced by, my grandfather lives in Chennai and he's friends with his grandfather, and they used to play bridge in the club every day, and they introduced us and we met, we hit it off.
Right. And what were, the toughest moments for you over the course of his entrepreneurial journey? Because the first time around, things didn't go so well. The way Eruditus has seen that spike of growth. What was it like?
I think we're married 15 years, and being married to an entrepreneur, I've seen the ups and the downs. Luckily with him, he's the kind of person, in Sanskrit there's a word called Sthita Pragya, means steady wisdom. So I never felt the highs that much, nor did I feel the lows. I think we're both very rooted that way. We're not very enamored by the success that, by God's grace, we've got, not very dejected by the lows as well. So the journey, if you ask me, has been memorable. I remember, see, when you're successful, people see the public glories, but very few people see the private sacrifices. I know there have been many, but I don't feel it. I've loved the journey so far.
Right. Both of you, also have a family office now, right? Damera Ventures, through which you guys want to make investments and also pay it forward to the startup ecosystem, and the Innoven investment was part of that. So take me through your interests, what kind of ventures do you want to invest in? What's the plan there?
Yeah, I'll allow Bhagesh to talk about it as well. But my general view is that the stupidest thing that somebody can do is to take a lot of money to the grave, because that helps nobody. Yeah. The second thing I believe is that, again, growing up in India, you see so much poverty and so many people who have aspirations but don't have the means, that as somebody who has been fortunate to get that, you can't but think of giving back, right? And so that's always been there. And, I do it day to day in my full-time day job, which is Eruditus and Emeritus. But also we came to a point where we felt we can do other things even outside of that. And Bhagesh, I'll let you speak a little more about it, because she actually drives most of it.
While he's committed 100% to growing Eruditus and Emeritus, I think I've come to a point in my life where I feel that I have these amazing resources at my fingertips, and how do I use these resources and apply them to solve some of the world's problems. And we both share this goal that I want to make myself relevant. I want to back startups. We've got so much from the startup ecosystem that it's time to give back. So what Damera Ventures does is two things. One, we give grants to non-profit institutions, and second, we back startups that really have social impact.
And all these are related to education and learning in some form, because that's your core DNA,
that is, but I also come from a background of sports science and nutrition. I'm a master's in food science and nutrition. I've been an athlete back in the day. So we recently backed a company called Khelo More, that think of it like an urban ladder, but for sports coaching. So they come home, they provide coaching for kids in cricket, football. They also book turfs. You can go on their app and book a football turf or a box 8 turf or etc. And why this is a two-sided platform is it also gives the coaches a way to, these coaches are ex-players who've not really made it to the national teams and international teams. And it gives them a way to earn their livelihood. So we also make investments like these, where I feel very deeply about certain areas like sports, the culture of fitness in our country. Now the goal is how can we get this coaching from like a tier 2 and bring it to tier 3 cities, etc. So we also do investments like that. We recently invested in a company called Rhapsody Education. It's led by a very famous pianist called Anil Srinivasan. And they go to children in government schools in South India, and they are trying to teach curriculum and creative thinking through classical music. So that's also what we've done.
Right. Let me circle back to, Unicorn and Eruditus. What would you say is your superpower as an entrepreneur?
Oh, yes.
Actually, maybe she can
answer this.
Yeah.
I hope it's the same thing though.
For him, I've seen him and I'm privy to a lot of his conversations and, the way he does his deals or whatever. He has this innate, he can't hear no for an answer. He's got that grit and that fighting spirit. For him, a no is a delayed yes. So that's one.
Perseverance.
Yeah. And just that ability to say, what? No, why can't I do this? I will do this. I will find a way. That undying entrepreneurial spirit is so important.
As it was said in this famous poem by Tennyson called Ulysses, to struggle, to strive and to seek and never to yield. Which I think is the definition of entrepreneurship in some sense. And I've seen enough no's in this journey that I like the way you said delayed yes, or door shut is in my mind kind of half open. It's not really shut.
I think for the first 6 or 7 years of Eruditus, we grew organically. We didn't raise any institutional funding. I think he was rejected by 20 investors.
But when she says no, it's a firm no. There's no delayed yes there.
Make note.
That I've learned. That's different. Outside the house, entrepreneurship is different.
On that note, thank you both very much for joining us on Next to Billions.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Chandra. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.